Hi there, it's Jonathan Bocher from PlayGuitar.com. Today we're going to look at a few different techniques and playing rhythm guitar and roll them all together into kind of a single 12-bar example. And the idea is to be able to change up your rhythm techniques so that you can make your playing a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more interesting, right? For too many songs, they just use the exact same techniques all the way through the song. And while that's not wrong in and of itself, there are ways to make things a lot more dynamic and a lot more interesting and engaging for the listener and for the player, because the more dynamic your playing is going to be, the more you're going to enjoy playing it. So what we're looking at today is a muted stroke strum, and we're going to be using bar chords because that makes it easiest to mute all 6 strings. Now you can use this technique with open chords as well, but it requires, some interesting hand movements, right? So let's just talk about that briefly since I'm already here. So the technique is basically to just cover the 6 strings and then keep a very steady strum going on, hitting all 6 strings at the same time, okay, and evenly. So if you're using open chords, then you need to use, well, it depends on which chord you're doing, but in the case of an A, like I use just my first finger to create that mini bar there. So that gives me 3 more fingers that I can use to mute my other strings when I want to do that muted stroke. The same's true for like an E minor. I could use the 3rd finger here. For a G, I might want to just roll my fingers down and just kind of flatten my hand out on the strings there, so you get that. Right? D, I'm not going to go through all the chords, but you get the idea, right? You can use this technique on open chords as well. The reason I picked bar chords is because you're already covering all 6 strings. So really all you have to do here is release the pressure on your fretting hand, but keep your frings on the strings. Keep your fingers on the strings. And that just creates this muted effect, right? And so it's just a very rhythmic sound. And we're strumming in 16th notes, 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E. And in our progression, pretty much everything is 1 bar, except towards the end. And so we're going to do 4 16th notes of like the chord, and then 4 16th notes of the muted stroke strum, and go back and forth, right? So what that sounds like, our first chord is a D, which I'm playing here on the 5th fret, D major kink bar. So what it sounds like is 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a, right? So on the 1s and the 3s we're making music, and on the 2s and the 4s we're making just a rhythmic sound. Okay, so now 1 note on that D, if you really want to kind of chunk it up a little bit, you can add in that A note down here on the 6th string. Okay, you can hear how it really kind of thickens and beefs up the low end of that chord, right? You can hear how adding in that A adds a lot in the low end. Now the A is not the root note of the chord, but it is found in the chord. So technically this would be a D over A. And you can do this. I do this a lot with bar chords. If I want that thick, growly, chunky sound, you can add in the lower 5th of the chord, right? D. There's your A, which is the 5th, and the lower octave is the one we're talking about. Anyways, I don't want to go down that road too much. So we got D for one bar, just like we played it. Then we've got G major for one bar. And then we've got D for another bar. Okay? And then we've got A for another bar. That's 4 bars. We're going to use that same rhythm pattern throughout. And then we're going to repeat that 4-bar phrase. Do it again. That gets us to 8 bars. And then we change things up a little bit. We go for an open E minor. Okay? And then a D over F sharp. So the way I like to do this is to use my thumb, and I kind of roll it around and just kind of enough to grab that 6th string on the 2nd fret, which is an F sharp. Then a G major, and then an A. Now you can hear the difference in dynamics created by going from this, straight 16th notes to just these big open strums, right? And that really adds a lot of depth into your playing. So these are half notes here. And then now we're at bar 10, right? Yeah. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, okay? And then we're going to do 1 bar of building on the A. And these are going to be all downstrokes, okay? Not up and down. Not like that. You can hear there's quite a difference, especially in a build. Now you can use different techniques to get a bit of a build. You can start off more muted. I like to use the palm of my hand, muting the strings over here, which keeps them kind of from ringing out as freely. You can start there and then gradually release that. I also tend to use my thumb as another muting tool quite a bit. So I hold my pick in quite close to my thumb, the tip of the pick here. And so oftentimes my thumb is kind of engaged with the strings. And if I want to let things ring through more clearly, then I just kind of back that off a little bit and I let the pick do all the work instead of my thumb hitting the strings too, right? So there's 2 different techniques you can be using. And then of course simply just giving it more brawn, right? Like give it a little more of a little more strength on those pushes, and just try to do a steady build across the 8 beats, right? 1 and 2, right? So we've got on the 8th notes there. And that gets us to our last bar, and we're going to throw a little riff in, okay? This riff comes straight out of the D major chord that we're playing up here. And 2 of those notes are right here. We've got an A and an F sharp right there, right? So we're going to slide in. It doesn't matter where you start, but we're starting on the 4th string. Typically with slides, I wouldn't start like down here, but you could if you chose to. That's really just kind of a stylistic choice, right? But typically at 2 or 3 frets away, something like that, whatever's convenient. Now I like to use hybrid picking, which means that I use my pick here on the 4th string, and then I'm using my my middle finger on my picking hand to pick the 2nd string right there, right? Now you could use your pick for both. You could use your fingers for both. Choice is yours. I'm just telling you how I'm doing it. Okay, but the key here is we're not strumming, even though you could. And if you're going to do that, you better get your fingers over here involved in muting the other strings, or it's going to just sound kind of muddy, right? And not defined. It's like there's no riff there. It's just strum, strum. And yes, I threw a little bit of vibrato in there as well. which you can do if you so choose. That is our progression. If you've been around a little while and you've seen some of my other videos, you may have seen me talking about inverted thirds, which is the same as a sixth. It depends on your perspective of which note is the root note. But these are lovely little pairings of notes that sound great because they come right out of the chord. And a fun little twist on this particular pairing is that that A and the F sharp, you know, we don't have to just play them right here. We could play them in different ways around the fretboard, right? So here's a completely different way that you can use the exact same notes and produce a totally different riff, right? We've got A and F sharp, and we've got a G down here and an E, right? So we could go, or, which sounds an awful lot like a video game I used to play years ago. So you can use either of those two riff options on the last bar of this 12 bar if you want. But let's go ahead and throw this thing together and see what it sounds like. I've got a bit of a drum track to help us along. I'm going to turn that on and we'll take it for a spin. All right, there you have it. I played the two different types of riffs in there. One quick note on the strumming is you want to be very even. You want to hit all 6 strings. There's a time and place for strumming, you know, half of the strings or some of the strings, or hitting root notes, or, you know, bouncing around different ways. This is not one of them. This is a time when you want to be very consistent, very straight and even as you go across all 6 strings. So you get just a nice, complete strum. Okay? So that's it basically. Hope you have some fun with that. If you want the drum track, you can download it underneath this video if you're watching on PlayGuitar.com. If you're watching on YouTube, you can click the link below the video and it'll shoot you over there and you can get the drum track from right there. I will also roll it at the end of this video so that you can play around with that right there. You have yourself a great day. If you would like to take your rhythm playing to the next level, check out my dynamic rhythm guitar course. It is comprehensive and it'll take you a really long way in your rhythm playing, but in nice small steps, right? So everything is kind of laid out in such a way so that it builds upon the last step. So that's a lot of fun. Tons of practical examples. Check it out, and we'll see you again another day.